And it's always nice to have visitors here in the House and to watch the proceedings as they go forward. But I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about Bill 26 in the second reading. And I guess I'll start off by saying that I understand the intent. I think the intent is admirable. But I'm very concerned about the consequences and what we're really trying to accomplish in this bill. To read from the minister's press release on the 21st of November, or the government's press release. It says, with 96 deaths and 1,384 injuries caused by impaired driving on Alberta roads, and this last year, Alberta has introduced new legislation aimed at improving safety on the province's roads. Bill 26, introduced in the legislature by Transportation Minister, imposes tougher sanctions on impaired drivers, especially repeat offenders. And that is excellent to that point. The problem, and as the member from Calgary Varsity just pointed out, it's stated here that it's supposed to go after impaired drivers. Impaired driving, to my understanding at this point in Canada, is over the blood alcohol level of 0.08. But there's a lot of content in this bill that talks about below 0.08. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that at this point and my concerns, and perhaps more especially the Albertans that have contacted me. I just spent the last hour and 40 minutes over at the U of A talking to a class there about government, about laws, legislation. And I asked them if they thought we should lower the blood alcohol limit to 0.05, and I thought there might be a little bit of discussion on it, but it was unanimous. They all said no. We talked a little bit about the science of it and why they thought no. And the key is that the studies, and again, I'll start, I guess, by saying this really should go to committee, I believe, because we need to do more research on this. If there's something new or new evidence forward that I'm not aware of, I would change my position. But my understanding, Mr. Speaker, is that 0.08 is the legally impaired level of driving, where the laws of the land say that you're impaired and you're not to drive at that level. But the biggest content of this bill is more about the 0.05 to 0.08, and that's a concern. The intent, we've all heard that story, that the intent that we've paved the road to some destination that we don't want to arrive in with good intentions. And I feel that this is a lot of good intentions, but when we arrive at the end, we've put a lot of people at that destination they don't want to be in, that I don't think they've done anything illegal or really endangering others around us. And that's the question and what the debate should be. I was disappointed to be down in the press room this afternoon to listen to our Premier talk about this to the press. And she said that she wants this passed by Christmas. But what was interesting to me is that she said that we had a robust discussion in caucus. And we talk about free votes. But I'm going to be amazed. I am personally going to be amazed if there is one member, let alone 10 over there, that's going to stand up and vote against this. Yet the Premier talked about a robust discussion and about a more honest, a more open, a more transparent government. But yet I will bet they're going to be whipped. And they're all going to vote for this because they've lost that discussion in caucus where they say the democratic process really takes place in the province of Alberta. Again, I look at that as another broken promise to Albertans that this isn't a more open and transparent. And I do hope that I am wrong on this in the next few days. And again, the velocity at which she's pushing these bills through concerns me greatly. We're not doing the research. We don't have the evidence being brought forward to say this is what it is. Because if we did, I think that the federal government would be coming in with a law saying that we need to reduce the impaired level to 0.05, and they would present a case. But there's been no case presented. And it's kind of interesting. And again, because of the speed at which this stuff is coming forward and the size of our caucus and the funding to our caucus, we don't get to do the research that we'd like to. And so sometimes we have to take things at book value, and I don't have time to double check it. But according to the stats that I've been given, Mr. Speaker, only 2% of the fatally injured drivers who were tested we're in that 0.05 to 0.08. And so when you take these numbers that we start with, the 96 deaths and the 1,384, and go by 2%, we, in my opinion, are running after pennies when there are gold coins rolling along the ground beside us, and we're focused on these pennies when the bigger problem or the bigger opportunity is being missed. There's been many members that have talked eloquently about the importance, and this is where it really is of enforcing the laws that we have in our land now. I am confident that if we were to ask, there is nobody in here, and we would vote unanimously, that nobody wants drunk or impaired drivers on the road. The Minister of Education then got up and says, well, there's zero tolerance. Then let's pass a legislation, if that's what our intent is, on zero tolerance. But I don't believe that is the intent. When we look at those accidents, only 40%, according to the stats that I've received, of these deaths are from people that are impaired at 0.08 or above. 40%. And so, Mr. Speaker, what that says to me is that there's a bigger problem, though this is a big problem, there's a bigger problem with the other 60%. And I don't see any legislation coming forward, but perhaps this government thinks that that will all change next year because we can't drive while we're holding a cell phone. I don't know. But again, let's look out down the road and be a little bit patient before we run off and pass all these feel-good bills when we don't even know. And again, our former Premier always referred to this, and I love it, is the unintended consequences. What are the unintended consequences if we were to pass this and it's enforced by this Christmas? I have a lot of friends, relatives that live out in rural Alberta. They might drive into a small town. They might be there for a hockey night with their children, had a great night. They might stay afterwards on a date, want a glass of wine, whatever else, and then they need to drive home. They're not impaired. They're within the legal limit, but yet they can't afford to risk, because our government is going to pass new legislation saying that, oh no, that's unacceptable, and we're going to confiscate your car for 3 days, or your vehicle, whatever it might be. And again, no judge, no jury. This is just action, the heavy hand of government stepping in, saying we know best, and scooping it away. But I even take the next step with the unintended consequences. Has there even been an economic study? And is it done by somebody competent? Because I question that, because this government had their economic study on raising the royalties and saying the billions of dollars they're going to get. There's been many referred to saying that if we raised our progressive tax, that we'd be able to get another $6 billion. 11. Oh, thank you. $11 billion if we raised our progressive tax. But these people don't understand the consequences, that those people who have moved here will move away to another jurisdiction where they're not taxed so heavily. If we remain competitively, I was asked, would I move? When I was running, when I was actually elected a few years earlier, some of the wealthiest individuals that I met with, they said, you know what? I don't need to stay here. My money doesn't need to stay here. If they pass this, I'm leaving. I would stay here. I'm not one of these ones you're going to get supposedly $1 million if you change the tax. Those people who are wealthy, they have other residences, they have other places. This one individual I talked to, he sold 260 properties and liquidated out and left our province because they changed that. People do move. Money and people move, yes, with the royalties. And we lost a great individual. I always say wealth is wonderful, and if there's two individuals that I would love to have here, is Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. But again, how many individuals are we... are we going to lose, and how many small businesses are going to suffer? And he's free to pay more. It's interesting that people talk like that, but yet they don't do it. Warren Buffett could donate a lot of money to the U.S. government if he wants to, but instead he sets up his own organization and makes sure the money is spent well. And he does a better job than the government does by a long shot, in my opinion. Anyways, well, and he's free to run to be the president as well. There's a lot of wealthy ones down there that are interested in doing that, and I say go for it. But, Mr. Speaker, the problem with this bill is the unintended consequences. We have no idea what it is going to do to small businesses, what it's going to do to people, but yet what we do know is that it's going to catch very few individuals or decrease, I believe, the fatality that are on our roads and the carnage, which is what this bill is aimed to do. But again, as this government so often, when they aim at a target, I don't know, they're cross-eyed or something because they can't even hit the target that they're purporting to shoot towards. And so I just...
Talking about blood alcohol levels?
Yes. And small businesses are going to suffer because the Premier wants to have this bill passed by Christmas.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I'm with you. Totally.
Great. It's a big problem. The economic consequences I don't even think were considered. This is a feel-good bill with good intentions that is not going to accomplish what the Premier and every one of us in here really want, and that's to reduce or to eliminate, really, drunk driving.
Yes.
And this bill does not address that.
Exactly.
And so we have to ask ourselves, why would we pass it? But like I say, the real acid test for me on this new open and democratic government is I cannot believe that every one of the government members is going to be in complete concurrence with this and vote in favor. When we have our vote, I do not believe that we're going to see any discrepancy over there, which you have to ask the question.
How about Lac-La-Biche St. Paul?
Yes, Lac-La-Biche St. Paul, I've already talked to him and he's all excited. He's the, oh, thank you. He is the carrier of this bill, so of course he's going to vote for it. You pick they're all for it. Trust me, we'll do a standing count. But Mr. Speaker, remember what you were saying about chatter? We'll do it. We'll do it very shortly. Very shortly. But Mr. Speaker, I'm very concerned. This bill should be sent to committee. We should do some research. We should have some better numbers to verify why we're wanting to expand this. I believe that this is a desperate government that's looking to be popular. I believe this is a desperate government that needs cash because they don't know how to control the spending that they have. And this is the intent of this bill. There's no thought. There's no thought here on the real consequences of this bill. And so I would urge members to postpone this and, again, really send this to committee and let's do some research. And if it comes back in the spring or sometime shortly to say, you know what, we have a major problem, that 2% that we have right now really is 60% of the fatalities on our roads. We just didn't do a good enough job of collecting the data. I'm all for lowering this. But I do believe that the 0.08, there's a lot of science that went into that. And again, it's called the impaired level. And everybody who is driving is impaired to some extent or another.
So
whether they're distracted.
Evidence-based decision-making.
It's not what?
Evidence-based.
No, this is not evidence-based decision-making. This is popularity. This is a need for revenue. And I'm disappointed that the government, in its haste, wants to bring this forward, and the Premier saying that I want this by Christmas. And again, all we've done is we've changed the head of the beast, not the behavior of the beast, which isn't good enough for Albertans. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope that we'll do a little bit more research. I would love to hear if there's a robust discussion in caucus. I cannot believe that you don't want to share some of your robust thoughts with Albertans on Hansard. And it's just, like I say, it's amazing, you know. I'll let you ask them all those things. But please let me try and concentrate my last 30 seconds. I believe it's going to be small towns in rural Alberta that will be punished the most with this bill. And I hope that rural Albertan is looking at this and realizing what this government is going to force through here in the next 2 weeks. It's wrong. I ask people to vote against this. I will be voting against this. But I want to speak out against driving drunk. Driving with impaired abilities is not acceptable. And what we need to do, and there is this in the bill, is we need to raise the penalty and the consequences for repeat offenders and those that are drunk, and stop them and get them off the road. But this bill is not going to do it, in my opinion, in the current state. I'll sit down and hopefully hear some more robust discussion.
Thank you very much. Honourable members.